And welcome to another edition of FnA Presents Up in the Rafters.
Hey, up in
We're
Skid Row.
up in Skid Row. I'm far away from that. I'm actually in Montana, celebrating with Kanye. But we actually are doing the Zoom series, as we've mentioned before. We've had a lot of Laker opinion, but now we want to freshen it up a bit. It's been a long time since we've had the person down the hallway from us. We love this man. He does the the halftime, and the post game coverage for the Clippers radio network. Let's give it up for our great friend, Adam Auslund. Adam, hey!
What's good, guys? Thanks for having me back on tonight.
Yeah, it's so great. And we wanted to get you on for multiple reasons, but we wanted to start off with this first one because this is NBA. This really did impact a lot of NBA fans, even though he was ages ago. The legend, the myth of Bill Russell. I mean, how did you feel when you first heard about his passing over the weekend?
I was taken aback a little bit. I was vacationing in Tahoe. Someone who's not that big of a sports fan told me that, and I was a little bit shocked. Just because Bill Russell has been intertwined with the game for so long, and he's been called the game's greatest winner. And you can make that argument. Everybody throwing around the GOAT argument so much, but I think Red Auerbach said it back in the day that Michael Jordan might be the greatest player, but if I'm looking to win, I'm going with Bill Russell, who was 21-0 in winner-take-all type of games, and obviously meant so much more than just his play on the court, but what he did off the court in his time. And he's just woven into the fabric of the NBA. It's going to be strange. And I know he hasn't been there to give out the Finals MVP since 2019. I believe the last person to receive it was Kawhi Leonard, but Bill Russell was always there to hand that out, his trophy. It's just going to be a strange time without him.
Yeah. And Mark was the one that let me know about Bill Russell passing away. And it was kind of crazy because we do know that he's old, but he's not someone that you think of as going away necessarily. And yeah, I totally forgot that the last time we saw him around was probably 2019 when before the pandemic. And it makes sense now as to why he's gone away. But even when Kobe passed away, just to see him wearing the Lakers attire, and just, he always was even though seeing him in Laker colors was even more astonishing because there was a rivalry, but then again, he just seemed like the ambassador of the league at that point.
Well, I hate to bring up a PG kids movie and a line from that to encapsulate this, but is it Heroes Are Forever, but Legends Never Die from The Sandlot? It just feels like that. Some of these people are iconic. They're eternal. And Bill Russell is certainly one of them.
Yeah. Now with him wearing Laker colors and just obviously Kobe, obviously, he's supporting Kobe and whatnot. Do you think do you think Boston fans would kind of feel a little I don't know, a little funny watching Bill Russell, Celtic legend, great, wearing Laker colors? I always felt I was man, I wonder what, I have no problem with it, but I'm curious. Do you think Celtics fans would have a little tiny problem with it, with their history of Bill Russell too?
I think there are a couple of times where that's okay in that situation, and then also at Bird's retirement, where Magic had the Boston Celtics T-shirt underneath his warm-ups, and Larry Bird pulled at that, and they had a good laugh, because when you can have those moments where you let down the competitiveness of the rivalry just for a second and let it breathe a little bit, because obviously there's friendships that go beyond the court with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, but there's a respect to it as well between the two most storied franchises in the league.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there was another passing just before this podcast started because we're recording on Tuesday night. And right before I hopped on the Zoom, you were the one that broke the news to me about legendary Dodger broadcaster Vin Scully passing away at the age of 94. I mean, this guy was another person that just seemed like he was going to live forever. And the Dodger fans, I really do feel as if have said their goodbyes time and time again. He was always there. You and I work at AM 570 LA Sports, Adam. How often do we hear his voices on the air? And this is just a sad day for not just Dodger fans, but for a lot of Los Angelinos.
baseball fans, sports fans everywhere. I mean, I mentioned the GOAT word earlier with Bill Russell, and there's some debate in the NBA about that when it comes to players. But I think when you're talking broadcasters, without question, it's Vin Scully. And Giants fans could admit that because I'm doing that right here. And I know you'd concur as well, Zach, but Vin Scully, they call him the voice of a generation, the voice of your childhood. I didn't grow up here in Los Angeles, but the calls, the history, you can't write baseball without him. And the legendary, not just him being there on the call, but knowing when to lay out for a call like he did with the Kirk Gibson home run with the crowd going wild. But before that, saying the impossible has happened. He just I feel completely inadequate tonight talking about him and Bill Russell in this profession because those two are two of the best to ever do it in the field. And Vin always found the right words. He was so precise with his words. And to do that solo while he was working alone, and it never felt like there was an unnecessary pregnant pause or he was taking his time to try to find that word. It was always there at the tip of his tongue. I've heard broadcasters say this before. On my good days, they just roll out. Vin Scully didn't have any bad days. They just seemed to always be there waiting for him.
I know as we're getting older, it's like it's one of those where it's like, when when Tommy Lasorda passed, that was we all kind of knew he wasn't feeling well, and everyone's getting to that age, it's obviously going to be, it's life changing because it's like, wow, we're living in a world where Vin Scully is no longer around. I'm trying to think, is there anybody up to his par of as far as broadcasting that's like a generational talent? It's once in a, I feel like he's like generational, once in a lifetime. Is there any other broadcasters out there that you can think of that that could sort of kind of be that next generational voice?
On a night like tonight, I would say Vin Scully's peerless. He's a cut above everyone. I think it was pretty universal. And this isn't something in retrospect or because of his death that people are now lionizing him. No, people were saying this while he was alive.
Yeah.
His last 25 years, it was as if he already secured the title as the greatest broadcaster of all time and just continued to prove it over and over again. So, the legendary calls, the perfect game from Sandy Koufax, the perfect game in the World Series before, the Kirk Gibson home run. It's funny, as a Giants fan, one of the first calls that comes to mind, I think, is the 2004 Steve Finley home run, which I'm sure seems pretty inconsequential when it comes to this rivalry, although both teams are playing tonight. But the home run by Steve Finley to beat the Giants to take them out for the NL West title. A lesser, maybe under the radar call by Vin Scully.
Again, as Adam alluded to, he's a Giants fan. I'm a Giants fan. But Mark, you're a Dodger fan. How do you feel about this?
Obviously, it's a bummer. Vin Scully, man, it's like one of those things where, he's been around our whole lives. 94, my grandma lived to 94, and that's damn near 100 years of life. So that's 100 years, 94 years of, people having Vin Scully, a part of their life, part of their childhood upbringing, special moments. So, it's obviously it's sad. It's, I'm sure when I talk to my mom later, she's going to be very, very sad and disappointed because, she's I'm a huge Dodger fan. She's a bigger Dodger fan. Baseball's like her life. So, it'll be a sad moment to talk to her about it. But, if anything, I really wish that, I'm glad, for example, the Lakers, they'll still use Chick's voice for certain things. I'm really hoping the Dodgers still continue using Vin's voice, just so that way, it's one of those generational things. So, the youngins and the up and comers and, just everybody that's, can still be introduced to Vin Scully and the greatness of his voice and his storytelling. That's obviously that's one thing that's been missing when it comes to broadcasting, is those special moments of you get some insight from him, you get stories from him. And I feel like there should be more of that. You get to know them a little bit more. And yeah, that's my one complaint about a lot of, I guess, broadcasters these days. I wish they can get, I'm sure maybe from a corporate level they can't, but I wish they could. I mean, you guys know more about, behind the scenes when it comes to radio. Is that something that's still open for them to do? Like, can people still be themselves, more personal, like get to know them?
Well, yeah, on podcasts, there's no FCC regulations.
That's true. Although I think I'm sure Vin, he dropped the F-bomb a couple times, right? In his career. No, not accidentally.
Not that I'm aware of. I did think back for a second here, and Vin didn't just meet the moment, he made the moment better. He was on the call for Hank Aaron's home run to pass Babe Ruth. So just time after time, these historical moments, Vin was a part of it. And I remember, I think it was back in 2017, after he retired, the Dodgers are in the World Series. And as much as we talk about the greatness of Vin Scully, there was murmurs of what he call a game with the Dodgers being back in the World Series for the first time since '88. And I don't know if this surfaced, but I'm guessing the reason that it didn't happen was because it would overshadow the game and Vin wouldn't want that to happen. People would be talking about that instead of the game, and it would take away from the broadcasters who had filled those seats afterwards. And I'm not sure everyone in his position would make that decision, but Vin did.
Yeah. Adam, okay, now on to NBA again with the LA situation. Lakers, obviously, this offseason, as quiet as it has sort of been around the league, LA Lakers are obviously trying to, and I should say loudly, trade Russell Westbrook. Whereas the Clippers, I don't know what's going on other than draft night. You guys have the draft. What are the Clippers up to? Why are you guys silently moving all the time? I don't trust you ever since you guys landed Kawhi and Paul George at the same time.
Coincidentally.
Hey, the Clippers front office, I say all the time, but they move in stealth. They got the SR-71 Blackbird, the X-Men plane, whatever you want to say it is. They don't leak. That's how their front office works. But I think most of Clipper Nation, they weren't expecting the Clippers to make any groundbreaking moves because in a similar fashion almost to what the Dodgers didn't do today, bringing in Juan Soto, the Clippers feel good about their roster when healthy. With Kawhi Leonard being back this season, with Paul George back to full strength, with the full season with Norman Powell, with Robert Covington, who was a huge pickup for them, it almost feels like this last midseason trade deadline was the Clippers offseason in some ways because of the move for Norman Powell, where he only plays 5 games, and you really haven't seen him that much in a Clippers uniform. Rocco came in and was unbelievable for them, obviously, and he gets re-signed. So I think it was more about just running it back than bringing in or shaking up the roster too much. Now, John Wall, obviously, that's the headline name you could say, but they're getting him for the mid-level exception. They're not the ones paying $46 million or whatever it is for his contract. And I do think based off of the guys they brought in the past who have kind of been rejuvenated as Clippers, Reggie Jackson was somewhat given up on. Nicholas Batum certainly was given up on. Rocco was not playing great basketball in Portland. As good of a defender he is, it's hard to make an impact on a team that doesn't have many guys next to you can rely upon to have your back defensively. I think John Wall is going to surprise people. In fact, I'll say this. I think by midway through the season, Lakers fans are going to be even more upset if Russell Westbrook's still on the team and they're watching John Wall playing well with the Clippers and wondering, why didn't we give up that first-round pick a year ago to bring in John Wall and have him and Westbrook swap places once again?
It's I always say that. I've been saying this for maybe the last 5 seasons. Water's wet, the sky is blue. There's a good chance that the Clippers are just gonna keep having better records than the Lakers, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. Really, I guess that rhymed after all. But that's one thing for sure. I always feel like you guys always get ahead, but but do you think though? I mean, I know a lot of Clipper fans say this every season for as long as I know. Do you think this is going to be the season where you surpass, certain, playoff spots and just kind of go a little bit deeper with this roster? Do you think it's a stronger possibility now with everybody healthy?
I'm amazed that I still see people on Twitter once in a while say, get to the Western Conference Finals before you talk. No, that actually happened in 2021. They made it for the first time in franchise history without Kawhi Leonard. And I think the majority of fans agree that if Kawhi didn't get hurt, they would have won that championship. They would have beat Phoenix. They would have beat the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, I'm in agreement with that. I've seen what Kawhi can do against Giannis Antetokounmpo in a playoff series before, and they still took the Phoenix Suns to 6 games. So this team, if they are healthy, if Kawhi Leonard is Kawhi Leonard, and we have seen him come back before from a major injury and just look better and get stronger afterwards, and him having almost a year and a half off between this injury and the time the 2022-2023 season starts, I think is advantageous, obviously, for the Clippers. They didn't have to rush him back, or if they made it to maybe the second round last season, it may have been up in the air if Kawhi is going to be available or not. But I think talent-wise, when you look at versatility, because the game has changed a few different ways recently in the last 10 years. We've obviously seen the revolution of the three-point shooting. Golden State Warriors, they're at the top of the mountain once again, and a lot of that is because they have two of the greatest shooters. They have the greatest shooter of all time in Steph Curry. And you know what? Klay Thompson is probably the second best shooter, best catch-and-shoot guy. And to stop that, what teams have been trying to figure out is how switchable can we get defensively? How multiple can our roster be? How interchangeable can the pieces be where we have a bunch of guys that can play 1 through 4, or maybe 1 through 5 on the court? And I don't think anyone has a glut of wings like the Clippers do. The fans call them Wingstop. But you look at it, Kawhi, Paul George, Nick Batum, Marcus Morris, Terrence Mann, Rocco, Amir Coffey, they have a ton of guys that can guard at least 3 positions and do it at a very high level. And I think that's the place where the game has moved a little bit, because everybody's hunting mismatches all the time. So you can't have many weaknesses in your game. Clippers fans are wondering, how is the best three-point shooter from last season going to get on the court this year in Luke Kennard? That's what they're wondering, because he obviously has deficiencies in other areas that other guys on the roster don't. They just don't have those holes in their game as good as he is from 3. The Clippers have a lot of guys who can shoot it well from 3, not as well as him, but it's become a positionless league, obviously. And I think the Clippers, like the Warriors, were at the forefront of the three-point shooting. I think the Clippers are at the forefront of just having that versatility out there.
Real quick.
I hate hearing that.
If the Clippers,
suck it, Mark.
Yes, give it to me.
if the Clippers win the championship, do you get a ring?
I have no idea.
You should.
I'd be lucky to be on the air for any team that wins the championship. I just would love to do that post-game show and to pull an all-nighter and be able to listen to people coming out of the woodwork that have been Clippers fans forever and have been waiting for this moment over 50 years to see this team finally win. Brian Seaman at times, obviously play-by-play man on TV for the Clippers, he said, this is one of the last great sports stories left, a perennial loser that finally turns into a winner, right? We've seen it with the Cubs. Okay, we haven't seen it with the Lions necessarily, but we've seen it with the Cubs. We've seen it with the Red Sox in baseball, the White Sox as well. That was very underrated. I think they went like 90 years and nobody cared in 2005. But we've seen this with so many teams with these massive turnarounds that have taken half a century. That's what the case would be for the Clippers to finally get that trophy that Larry O.B., as Kawhi Leonard would say. And I do think it would be quite the story, and people would be surprised at how deep Clipper Nation is when you see a team win a championship. Obviously, it just changes things. And it would be huge for them also because they're moving into the Intuit Dome in 2024, and they want to be able to have their own home finally. And if they could hang a banner there as well, more than the cherry on top. I forget what I got from Baskin Robbins earlier. I got extra fudge, extra whipped cream. Yeah, I got a lot of stuff. It would be all that. There's a drive-through near me. That should be illegal out of Baskin Robbins. How do you give them a drive-through?
Look, that's a great PR answer, but you didn't answer what I wanted. Okay. Like, do you get a ring? And it's okay to be petty here. This is a safe space. I'm asking you this because Tim Cates, who worked with the Dodgers, didn't get a ring during
but he didn't know beforehand whether he would or not. And I'm in that same position. I don't know.
here's the thing. Kristen Watson, who's the Dodgers reporter, that's also the Rams host, got a big old Super Bowl ring where she could take off the top and you could see the inside of SoFi Stadium from that ring. So I think you should be taken care of because this dude who's a billionaire, one of the richest men in the world, happens to own the Clippers. So do you think you'll get a ring?
If I had to guess one way or another, if you're putting me on the hot seat to that level, I think there's a better possibility than not, maybe.
There it is.
How about that?
Yes, that's good.
Jeez, you're trying to get me in trouble.
Like I have a soft spot. It's funny. I have a soft spot for Clippers fans because some of my close friends are Clippers fans. Rick Daddy on Twitter. I'm sure and you know a lot of those crews, right? I
know Rick. I know Rick, and he knows me, and he knows you, obviously.
Yeah. I went to his wedding. He invited me to his wedding. He wore a FnA. I specifically made him Clippard colored FnA shirts. I think it was the year you guys got rid of Donald Sterling. So I was like, this is my support. Because at the end of the day, like, I know Twitter, you're always on Twitter. Twitter's becoming a kind of toxic place now where it's even me. I'm just like, it's pretty bad. Do you feel like it's gotten worse?
There's just more people there now. That's all it is. They're just
that just
traffic.
Started. Yeah, that just started using the internet.
More a-holes. And I'm one of them sometimes, I got to admit. I have many regrets from late night Twitter debates on the NBA. NBA Twitter is the worst of Twitter, to be honest.
Okay, this is the perfect time to talk about this because you have a pinned tweet of LeBron James versus Kawhi Leonard from March of 2020, and I really think it's time for you to unpin it.
Not till it gets to 100,000 views, Zach. I'm not unpinning that bad boy yet. That makes me look relevant. How dare you? A guy like that might be able to get a ring if it got to 100,000.
I'm just trying to help you out here. I mean, LeBron went on to win the title that year. Maybe it's okay to let it go. Just
maybe you should let it go. Watch it again and digest the context of what I was talking about with the media bias in that tweet, which is why I got so many retweets, likes, and views.
Can I be honest? LeBron scored more than one bucket on Kawhi Leonard while Kawhi was guarding him that day. So if anything, it wasn't 1 for 4. There was actually twice in that whole clip of the montage that they showed in that highlight package where LeBron scored on Kawhi Leonard. So I'm just saying.
The Sport VU cameras have never been wrong for the Clippers, and that's a fact. Okay, I'm kidding. But erroneous information is out there, especially when it comes to the NBA and all the casuals who are on TV. And that's all I was saying. And yeah, it was a little bit of clickbait.
So as far as do you feel like there's a little bit more support for Clipper fans on Twitter or way less? Do you think it's growing? Because at least on my side, I obviously follow a lot of Laker fans and some of them are pretty dumb and say dumb stuff. Do you feel like you catch that kind of heat too?
You mean now that there's more Clippers fans on Twitter, there are some fans who aren't as educated about the basketball team?
That is correct.
I'd have to strongly disagree. Clippers fans are a rare breed. They are very high-level NBA fans because think about it. I grew up a Sacramento Kings fan. Kings fans were voted one year the smartest fans in the NBA. You know why that likely was? Because their team was losing for so long, and the tickets that they were selling to go to games at Arco Arena were putting the other team's best player on them to advertise to come to the ball game. So you kind of had to know about everybody else outside of your ball club. And the Clippers, for a lot of their time, especially 80s and 90s, they were in that position as well, where you had to look, you had your favorites on the team, but you had to be a well-educated, well-rounded NBA fan as well. And I think that's where Clipper Nation is coming from. And they just, we talk about the ring thing. It's well, let's cross that bridge when we get there. My God, they got to win the championship, and nothing is set in stone. People thought this after they brought in Kawhi and Paul George and what happened to the bubble. And then Kawhi Leonard tearing his ACL. From what we've seen the last couple of years with NBA winners, it seems to be survival of the fittest.
Yeah, I mean, again, I was there when I was the technical director that year that you're talking about with Kawhi getting hurt as the team reached the Western Conference Finals. And I agree. I'm willing to say that the Phoenix Suns had the easiest path to the NBA Finals, and they were probably that much of a bone stretch from Giannis, actually tearing his MCL, to where they could have actually had the easiest path to the title. But if Kawhi would have been there, it would have been Kawhi versus Giannis. The Clippers could have hung their first banner, and it would have been a different story. But yeah, I do think the Clippers. I would say the Clippers are.
In knowing that, why you got to give me this question a year ago? Should they have traded for Paul George or not? It's like you knew the mix was right. Kawhi just got hurt. It happens.
No,
the roster's right.
Do you mean the Paul George? Do you mean the last appearance that you had where I was like, "Are you sure you should have traded 6 first-round draft picks and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for Paul George?" Were you talking about that?
First of all, it was 5, and I think 2 of them were picks from someone else. But whatever. I'm just saying, Paul George dragged them to their first ever Western Conference Finals. And you agree that if Kawhi Leonard didn't get hurt, they would have won the championship that year.
I absolutely agree.
The ingredients are there.
Let me just ask you this then, okay? Because this offseason, I really felt as if was greedy with how many draft picks are being tossed around in these trade packages. I mean, that Rudy Gobert trade was like 4 first-rounders, and then now you're hearing the demand for how much Danny Ainge wants for Donovan Mitchell, or you're hearing how much the Nets want for Kevin Durant. Do you think this is all inflation when it comes to the first-round draft picks being asked or requested?
Is this a political thing we're doing here? Look, I think it was a bad precedent, the Rudy Gobert trade, because I don't think anyone else was going to give them that much for Rudy Gobert, who I do really like a lot. Yeah. And he's kind of been scrutinized more the last couple of years. How impactful is he? But the truth is, when the Utah Jazz didn't have him on the court last season, they were easily the worst defense in the league. So whatever you want to say about him in the postseason and what the Clippers did to him, speaking of that switchability and versatility and bringing him out to the perimeter and making him somewhat of a liability on the perimeter, Rudy Gobert is still one of the top defensive players of all time for big men. But that group of picks, and that was really because the NBA saves you from yourself now. They don't want you trading multiple first-round picks in consecutive years. But because they also traded the guy they just drafted, it's basically like they gave them their first-round pick this year as well. So any deal getting done now has to exceed that, you would think, for someone like Kevin Durant, even though you could say he's 34, but he's still locked up for a few more years on his contract, at least, if you are trading for him. But then again, it's the NBA, and if a guy wants out, they put you in a bad position where you're going to lose leverage if you don't trade him early on. Kyrie Irving, obviously just one more year on his contract, so you'd obviously get less for him, especially because he's so mercurial. But I do think there was a ripple effect from that Rudy Gobert situation where it brought the price up. Yes, inflation on everything, including NBA players this offseason. And maybe it did hurt more moves throughout the league.
And how do you feel about Nancy Pelosi visiting Taiwan? Mark,
First the ring question, now this. This is the trying to get fired episode.
This is the hard-hitting questions.
No, I'm glad you brought up KD because, my biggest thing is, do you think it's worth that? This is my curiosity, for your answer. Do you think it's they're asking prices a little too much? I mean, KD's what? He's in his early 30s now, right?
He's 34. He's 34 years of age.
Mid.
I mean, he still looks good though. That Boston series notwithstanding, where he was getting locked up left and right, but I still believe he's a top 3 player, top 4 player, 5 player at worst in the NBA today for this season, and could alter your franchise by winning a championship and being that mercenary that he's been in the past when he wanted to go to the Golden State Warriors. You bring in KD, you have a chance. You have a seat at the table to win this season, most likely, because you're only going to bring him in if you already have somebody there you think you can pair him with. But if the reports are true that, he wants to go to Miami, but they can't trade Jimmy Butler, they can't trade Bam, they can't trade Kyle Lowry, it's then you don't want to be traded because you got to give to get a little bit, Kevin Durant. One of those guys is likely coming back to the Brooklyn Nets. But I still think the most likely scenario, and I thought this pretty much from the beginning, is he stays in Brooklyn. Either that, if there was one move I would take, it was the recent proposal that was out there for Jaylen Brown. A package built around Jaylen Brown and the Boston Celtics, and KD and Jason Tatum together would certainly be nasty. But even if he stays in Brooklyn and he and Kyrie play out their time there, as Kyrie said, well, that's why I'm coming back. I committed to this all of a sudden. Well, no, the trade wasn't happening, apparently. Even if that happens, Brooklyn's still going to be great. And they're still, kind of like the Lakers with LeBron and AD. You have those two guys healthy in a 7-game series, you can still beat anyone.
Do you think Golden State is going to make a run at KD or any other superstar? Because I see a lot of extensions expiring by the end of next season.
Golden State has the pieces to do so. That would be, I don't know who would be more humiliating for. I guess Kevin Durant for sure. To go back to Golden State after leaving them, after winning with them, after they won 73 games, he lost to them up 3-1. Yeah, it'd be a bad look for Kevin Durant is what I'm trying to say here, to go back there. But I don't think Golden State would do it because obviously they don't need him to win. They just won this last season. And if you're looking at teams and who's going to improve the most, especially in the Western Conference, I still think Golden State has another rung on the ladder to climb up. Because I think Kuminga is possibly a future all-star. Wiseman's coming. They bring in DiVincenzo. They brought in JaMychal Green. Those are two really good under-the-radar-like moves. And Klay Thompson, by the way, another offseason where he gets to work out and train coming back from the ACL and the Achilles injury. I expect him to look better than even he did last season. I still think Golden State is absolutely loaded with Steph Curry, of course, leading things. And they have a future holding on to those pieces to not just win now, but to win years from now, possibly, where if Kuminga and Wiseman, are taking some of the offensive burden off the hands of Steph and Klay, and I can't say Draymond when it comes to offense, but some of the defensive burden off of him, then they have an extended window to win.
So it's going to be like Golden State, the Clippers, and definitely not the Lakers, right? Like in the top.
I wouldn't for sure say that. Look, things were so bad for the Lakers because even when they had Anthony Davis, LeBron, and Russell Westbrook in those 21 games, they were 11-10, and there was no combination all season between either of those guys, whether it was LeBron and AD or LeBron and Westbrook or Westbrook and AD, where they were a net positive. It just wasn't working. And remember, we came into last season, and a lot of people were hopeful on Westbrook. Well, public sentiment is obviously down the drain with him now when it comes to Laker fans. I got a long memory. And the narrative was Russell Westbrook is going to be that innings eater, get LeBron off the ball more, save his legs more, especially during the regular season. And I believe that too. I believe that could have worked. My issue was, what's Russ going to do in the playoffs? Because he's been awful. His last 5 times in the playoffs, he's got out of the first round just one time. It was in the bubble, and that was the only time where he shot over 40% from the field. He's been much worse, believe it or not, in the playoffs than he was last season for the Lakers. And when you have those 3 in a starting lineup or in any lineup, you automatically have 3 really non-shooters out there. LeBron can get hot, of course. AD can get hot if he's in the bubble in Orlando, the real bubble boy, they call him. He is a great player. But we got to be honest about something. We talk about TJ Warren averaging 35 points a game in the bubble, Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell going for 50 every night, the Phoenix Suns going 8-0, and this was before they brought in CP3.
Yeah.
Anthony Davis, during that playoff run, shot like Kevin Durant, maybe better. Long twos, he was at 48%. On three-pointers, he was almost at 40%. There's no stretch in his career of that length of time, 20 games or whatever it was, where he has ever shot that well from the outside. And he hasn't since as a Laker. Obviously, he hasn't stayed on the floor either, but I think a lot of what made Anthony Davis so unique was that potential. He showed it in the bubble. He hasn't shown the shot so much because he wants to play outside the bubble. If you don't want to play the 5, then you better be able to shoot a little bit more playing the 4. You better be able to stretch the floor. If you're out there with Westbrook and LeBron, you only got 2 other guys on the court. One's likely a big because AD doesn't want to play the 5. Maybe the other is a 3-and-D defensive guy. Maybe it's THT, whoever. Maybe it's Lonnie Walker now. But they just don't have the shooting in today's modern NBA. Now, if they're healthy, and I mean LeBron and AD, Westbrook has been able to stay healthy. You can at least say that for him. They're still a threat. They're still a threat to me. But they are obviously a notch below the Clippers, a notch below the Golden State Warriors, and I think a notch below the Denver Nuggets, who are getting Jamal Murray back and Michael Porter Jr. And remember, Denver, before that 2021 playoff run, or before the 2021 playoffs, they were playing beautiful basketball before Jamal Murray went down, a couple weeks after he went down, and eventually they petered out. But they probably thought themselves, I think Noah Eagle brought this up recently, that they were the team to beat if they weren't beat up. So it's not just the Clippers who are coming back reloaded with their guys and saying, we have the right formula. I think Denver has the exact same mindset.
Yeah, I agree. And Denver, it really is unfortunate because there's somebody that, even though they're like the Clippers, even though they have an army, one of the superstars go down and they're really not the same when it comes to a long run at the title. And I do think
who can withstand a superstar going down though? Who can?
Yeah.
What team can handle that? I would have said Brooklyn a couple of years ago when they had James Harden, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant, but they lost Harden and Kyrie and still took the Milwaukee Bucks to 7. It's a players' league.
The Raptors had Kawhi, and that's all they had really.
They did. They didn't run into the Golden State Warriors, though, with a healthy Kevin Durant, obviously, and then Klay Thompson went down in that series as well. But Kawhi was unbelievable. Siakam had his moments. Fred VanVleet, after he was a father, couldn't miss from the outside with the dad strength. And Kyle Lowry finally turned into a much better playoff performer, and they had that cohesiveness. They played together so well.
Yeah. Fred VanVleet played a lot like Phillip Rivers after he has a kid.
I would have expected Phillip Rivers to be a lot better than with all the kids. I mean, he was good.
He was good. I will say, okay, so with the Lakers, if you're the Lakers right now, if you're in the front office, what's your move? Are you going to make any moves before the training camp starts? Are you going to try to get rid of Westbrook? Are you even going to try to make a trade for Anthony Davis? Like, what kind of move are you going to make? What's your mind going into the next season?
I think you got to give away PS5s. And to do that, you also say you have a chance at Lakers tickets. Okay, that was messed up. I felt bad for Jeannie getting hacked like that. I love Jeannie Buss. That wasn't right, whoever did that, especially because some actually believed it because of the state of the Lakers and trying to get the loan a couple of years ago. But
I'm just saying, by the way, no billionaire has had their Twitter account hacked from my knowledge. I don't think any billionaire owner has had their account hacked. So for her, like, maybe it's time for her to sell. Maybe this is another indication.
I just want to know what link she was clicking on. That's all I want to know. We'll pop
and that's
then.
What you have Jeannie Buss's account hacked, and that's what you go with. You could have said, like, get Russell Westbrook off the team, or we got to trade in the works for Russ. Don't worry, Lakers fans, or something else that would have lit Twitter even more
click
on
on this
fire.
link for my full Playboy pictures that I had back in the 90s. You would have had a bunch of Laker fans like clicking on that.
I think they know where to go. But
Google.com.
In all seriousness, if you can't trade Russ and you're not willing to give up 2 first-round picks, and there's this friction between the front office and LeBron James and Anthony Davis maybe, and Clutch, because they're the ones who wanted him. And if you're Rob Pelinka, while the buck does stop with you, you have to listen to LeBron because, well, we don't know if he's going to sign that extension yet, but he's also possibly the greatest player of all time. And the Lakers pride themselves on taking care of players on the back end of their career and being that destination for superstars like that, generational talents. So they have to cave and give in. And they did, it sounds like, for Russell Westbrook, if the rumors are true that it was LeBron and Anthony Davis pushing this. So do you dig your heels in and say, you made your bed, now sleeping at LeBron? You're the ones who are going to have to figure this out on the court with Russ. This isn't about us. Or do you eventually say midway through the season, because I don't think it's over, I think they're going to revisit the same trade talks with Kyrie Irving eventually. And whether Russ is playing good or not, those 2 first-round picks, even though they're later on, 27 and 29, I still think there's a situation where, okay, we're going to lose Kyrie for nothing if we're Brooklyn because he's leaving after this season anyways. or we get a first-round pick, an expiring contract in Russell Westbrook that will also have teams a little bit tempted to trade for him that just want to get rid of some bad contracts. I wouldn't be shocked if the Charlotte Hornets revisited things if they ever had discussions with the Lakers. Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, guys like that who have longer deals and they want to get rid of them. And obviously Michael Jordan loves Russell Westbrook. He's part of the Jordan brand. So I think it's going to be an ongoing issue. And that's even if they're playing well. I still think it would be, okay, let's go sell high. Like, get out while we can, because as I mentioned earlier, Russ is going to get worse in the playoffs. And it's going to get worse overall for the Lakers, I think, as the season drags out, because there's going to be losing streaks. And you could say all the right things right now. And Darvin Ham's trying to do that too and toe the company line with how he's going to use Russell Westbrook. But we heard some of the exact same things with Frank Vogel. And they couldn't figure it out. And if the reports from Jovan Buha of The Athletic of Russ being kind of defiant and not wanting to be a role player, and my radio partner Kevin Vickers brought this up, it's a great point. Those other guys who became good role players, superstars later in their career, like Carmelo Anthony, like Vince Carter, they had some role player traits along the way, stuff that would transfer well into being a role player. Vince Carter could play D when he wanted to. He could be a good shooter from the outside. Obviously, Carmelo Anthony could do that and was one of the bright spots for the Lakers last season, although not that impactful. But Allen Iverson and Russell Westbrook types, they have to have the ball in their hands to thrive in this league. That's who they've been. I've always said, I love watching Russell Westbrook, but I would never want him on my team as well because he's so erratic. He's so unpredictable. And I think he raises the floor on a bad team. He could take a bad team. Like I think the situation with the Wizards might have been perfect for him. And he got his triple-double record there. But I think he can help a bad team, but he lowers the ceiling for a very good team because his strengths just don't mesh with a championship roster, especially when you have someone on it like LeBron James, because anytime the ball is in Russ's hands at the end of the game instead of LeBron's, that's a problem. But then why is he out there on the court? Because he can't play off the ball either. And this talk about we got to get him back to playing championship level basketball on defense. What does that mean? You're going to get Ben Howland on the coaching staff? Because that's the only time I've seen Russ play defense like that back at UCLA.
So my biggest concern is one head case for another head case, as in Kyrie Irving. Love Kyrie. I would like him to be on the Lakers, but do you feel like it would be a good idea to trade one Russell Westbrook for one Kyrie? Set aside your hatred for the Lakers. I just as a basketball fan. but I'm just curious. Like, do you feel like something like, would you pull that trigger? Like, one, soul for a soul. It almost seems like that way, at least for me. But I don't know. Do you think it'd be less stressful?
Why does it gotta be soul for soul? Like it's Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat. His soul is mine. Here's why I do it. Because I believe right now with Russell Westbrook, as the way the roster is constructed, especially because they likely have a guy who could help them more if healthy, in Kendrick Nunn, who we never even saw last year. Getting rid of Russ is also, I think, addition by subtraction, because more minutes for Nunn, more minutes for THT, who you're developing and maybe tossing into a trade later on. But with Russ, I don't think they have a chance to win the championship this season. So many things would have to go right, and I think there would have to be more roster moves. With Kyrie, even if it's small, you do have a chance. You do have a chance with Kyrie Irving. As much as a head case as he can be at times and what his motivations are, only he knows, I still think I would roll the dice with that. If it was for one first-round pick, I don't know what they were offering, but I would have done that for Kyrie Irving. I would have dealt with it all because, again, no chance of winning this year with Russ, slight chance with Kyrie.
All right, so now we're going to go away from NBA talk, and we want to know, what have you been streaming this summer? What have you been watching? Like, what are your things that you've been binging?
Let's see. Oh, well, this is just Twitter over here. No, I got, I've watched what everybody's talking about, and that's Stranger Things season 4.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
And I got to say, I liked it. I thought it was better than season 3.
Yes.
But it's almost too epic. Like everything is just explosions and massive special effects because they have an unreal budget and they can do whatever they want now, as opposed to season 1 and 2 and 3. Like, and then it went for so long. The last episode of 2.5 hours. I just tighten it up just a little bit.
Do you feel like it was? Go ahead.
They could have made it like Ozark, where it was at least 4 episodes to end it off. Like, why do they have to do movies, like full on back-to-back movies for the last 2 episodes?
Okay, Ozark upset me though too with its ending. I don't like how Ruth went out. She's too smart for that. I don't like how they were playing it like Sopranos style, where you kind of know what happened, but you don't know exactly what happened. You hear a bang, haha, we went out with a bang to end the series. I don't like that. It's too up in the air. Let's make it definitive. There's one show, and don't tell me about the last 2 episodes. Don't spoil it for me yet. But there is one show out there that has a chance for perfection, to stick the landing all the way through for 5 seasons, and that's Better Call Saul. Yeah. I know there's like 1 or 2 episodes left, and I'm behind a couple of them. But so far, I can say it's been flawless.
Let me just tell you, they all die. So...
Oh, I don't have to watch it anymore then. Thanks, Zach.
I haven't watched 1 episode of it. I'm just joking. I don't know what happens.
Shame on you in so many ways.
You know what? I agree, because like with going back to Stranger Things real quick, like the last couple of episodes, I'm like, okay, this is epic. This is huge. But where the hell did it go from here? Like, it reminded me of that Breaking Bad like last season, where it's like, okay, it's got to be over now, right? Like, okay, so like I'm just gonna assume the whole town of Hawkins just dies, and then they're gonna still roll credits for like 8 episodes, and that's it. Because where do they go from here? But I'm curious to see where they go. I mean, do you feel like there's any type of like any further character development or any surprises like potentially that can happen in next season?
I don't know, but they killed that stoner headbanger guy who played Metallica Master of Puppets on top of the trailer, and he was my favorite.
I know, me too.
Awesome. He was my favorite, even though I can't remember his name because he was only in 1 season. But I was really hoping maybe the redhead girl would die, or one of the guys from earlier seasons. And they took him out. But I think what's going to happen is, and this is what they teased at the very end, is finally the upside down world and the real world have merged. They're together. So it's going to be, I don't know, Hell on Earth, Doom 2 style, whatever.
Yeah, I'm just curious how, like, where's it going to go from here? It's like, I know there's like, you know, if you could look back to the previous seasons, there was like the 1 season where Eleven's sisters, I believe, like were out there. So like, I'm hoping maybe they somehow incorporate them into next season. Yeah. And I don't know, form the X-Men or something. I mean, what are you going to take down?
the new X-Men or the Next Generation, or I forget some of the spinoffs. That'd be interesting. Yeah, I don't know, but we're all going to watch, and they probably don't know yet either. They're probably making it up as they go along, like Lost at this point.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Adam. Again, if you have anything to plug, go ahead and plug away.
I just wanted to plug Stranger Things season 5. They're not doing that well. I don't know. I'll plug at Follow Adam A is where you can find me on Twitter. Of course, check out the FnA podcast, the FnA show with myself and Kevin Figures. I'm doing the Clips and Dip podcast as well with the guys formerly of Locked On Clippers. And yeah, I think I'm filling in for Kevin also this week. So some big shows producing for Fred Rogan, your favorite, Zach.
Oh, yeah. And I'm producing for PMS on Thursday. So I'll see you later on.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
All right. I'll see you there.
All right. Thank you again, Adam.
All right, Zach. All right, Mark. Love you guys.
Adam.
Love you. Bye.